Well, joining us for reaction, Professor Karen Milner, National Chairperson of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. Professor Karen, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. The statement from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation very clearly articulating that a decision has been made and a decision has been communicated, and this decisive measure is as a result of a series of unacceptable violations and diplomatic norms and practices, which they are saying pose a direct challenge to South Africa's sovereignty. What do you make of this decision by the government?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, and very good afternoon to everybody watching. I'll be honest, I think that it's quite a shocking state of affairs. It's come without warning, and I think it's really important to note the hypocrisy that this action represents. We have been seeing for the last few weeks South Africa absolutely silent, making no comment on gross human rights abuses in Iran and various other places around the world. As I speak to you right now, it seems like the death toll in Iran is well over 30,000 people. While having not just diplomatic relations with Iran, but actually having military maneuvers with Iran, that's the one side of DIRCO. And now they're expelling an Israeli diplomat for some tweets. This seems like a gross overreaction and totally hypocritical on the part of DIRCO.
Yeah, I know you're saying it's without warning. They are, of course, contending that, no, they did raise this before, so it's not without warning. In fact, they are saying they would have hoped that the conduct of the Israeli official was going to improve, but they are not seeing no such improvement.
So I think if we look at the timing, it's really, I mean, we really are talking about a draconian act. Expelling a diplomat from a country for tweets is a very draconian act, and we look at the timing of it. I think it's worthwhile looking at the timing of it. This has occurred a week after Israel offered a province in South Africa in the Eastern Cape Israeli technology to address a water crisis and to address water shortages in the Eastern Cape. So on the one hand, we have Israel offering technology, offering assistance to South African citizens who desperately need it. And on the other hand, we have South Africa overreacting to a series of tweets. And I am wondering about the timing, about why this has happened. As Israel offers support, as Israel offers NGOs to come in and help South Africans to address the needs of South Africa, that is the time that South Africa decides their tweets are unacceptable and that they are going to take the very extreme action.
Are the tweets unacceptable? Should it be accepted as a diplomatic norm that an Israeli official could insult the president of the host country?
I think we've seen quite recently, South Africans were outraged when it came to America not accepting Ibrahim Rasool's credentials as an ambassador from South Africa to the US based on the tweets that he had made against a president. And I think that it is typical to respond to these kind of things with anger. I think that it's important to look at whether or not the actions that the South African government and that DIRCO have taken were in proportion to what's happened in relation to Israel. We know that DIRCO is extremely hostile to Israel. We know that they have been hostile to Israel not only for the last 3 years, but for many years prior to this. So it doesn't feel as if these actions were taken on the basis simply of a legal position that Israel had not adhered to, but rather that this was a vindictive, punitive action taken in response to Israel, as I said before, doing not much more than offering help to a region in South Africa that desperately needs it.
So what do you make of the other issue that they raised, the abuse of diplomatic privilege, where they're saying there's a deliberate failure to inform DIRCO of purported visits by senior Israeli officials? South Africa taking a dim view to that, saying it's not in keeping with the fundamentals of the Vienna Convention, but also it undermines the sovereignty of the country.
I think to suggest that it undermines it, that again, I'm not sure which diplomats they're referring to. I don't have knowledge on that. But I'm guessing that they may well be referring to the diplomats who came out again to talk to the Eastern Cape and to offer help to the Eastern Cape. I think that to suggest that that people coming to your country to offer help is undermining the sovereignty of your country is excessive. And I think it's a great pity that at a time that we are starting to see peace in the Middle East, that South Africa has an opportunity to engage again in the Middle East, exactly at that time, South Africa decides to take this rather drastic action.
I mean, their butting shot says, well, we hope that the Israeli government will ensure that future diplomatic conduct demonstrate respect for the Republic and established principles of international engagement. So not closing the door to future diplomatic and I suppose continued diplomatic relations with Israel.
I think that expelling a diplomat with 72 hours notice, it's quite hard to argue that you're keeping a door open when you're not just having a démarche, but you're actually expelling a diplomat on the basis of 72-hour notice. I want to point out that it's Friday afternoon at the moment in South Africa. The Jewish Sabbath is coming in a matter of hours. And I think there's also a tremendous insensitivity that the government has done this to a Jewish diplomat who's going to find it very difficult to meet these requirements within the laws within Jewish law. So I think there are a whole lot of things that it's all very well to say we'd like to keep the doors open, we'd like to continue diplomatic engagement, and I certainly hope that that will be the case. But these actions are not the actions of a government that is trying to keep the door open. Yeah. These are actions of a government that has taken drastic and extreme action against the only Jewish state in a way that they have not done against any other country with far, far worse records in terms of the positioning.
So they're saying these are, of course, actions that fall within their powers to take in terms of the conventions that are in place for anyone who directly challenge the sovereignty of South Africa. You're saying the country is not within its right to exercise that power?
What I'm saying is I think it's extreme to argue that what the Israeli diplomat has done is actually challenging the sovereignty of South Africa. What the Israeli diplomat has done has in fact offered help and assistance to South African citizens in a way that I don't regard as challenging the sovereignty, and I'm not an expert in international law, but I think from any person who is looking at this from an objective perspective and saying there were some tweets that were made that the South African government objects to, and in response to that, the South African government has given 72 hours notice to a diplomat to leave the country. South Africa may be within their rights to do that, but having said that, it shows the hypocrisy, I think, of DIRCO, that they have obsessively focused on the Israeli government in relation to this. They say that they are open to negotiation and to engagement, but they take the most drastic possible action in order to get their message across. When, to be quite honest, this is not the way they treat any other country, only the Jewish state.
Professor Karen Milner, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. National Chairperson of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. They're responding to the decision, decisive measure taken by the South African government, saying following a series of unacceptable violations of diplomatic norms and practices, which pose a direct challenge to the sovereignty of South Africa, saying these violations include use of official Israeli social media platforms to launch insulting attacks on His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, and a deliberate failure to inform DIRCO of purported visits by senior Israeli officials. With the Jewish Board of Deputies saying, well, these don't warrant the type of heavy-handedness they are saying that they would have meted out to this official.